Did the ancient Greeks have man caves and she sheds? Backyards with slides and jungle gyms for their kids? How about flush toilets and running water in their houses? Attached garages for their carts? And is it true that they had houses built out of pasta? These and other questions will be answered right after this. I'm Professor Jerome Arkenberg, and I've been teaching a wide variety of history courses at colleges across this country for the past 30 years. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the evolution of the ancient Greek house, from the Archaic to the Hellenistic periods. The four styles of ancient Greek houses: Prostas, Herdraum, and Peristyle. The rooms typically found in each style of house and their function, and the question of whether there is something like a harem, a dedicated women's room. At the end, I'll have the wrap-up quote on this video. But first, make sure to click like, share, especially subscribe, and that little bell thingy, so I continue to bring you more great videos just like this one. Greek houses, after the fall of the Mycenaeans, or Achaeans as I prefer to call them, were normally quite modest, pretty much what you see here. Single-roomed houses, about 30 by 50 feet, with only one story, built on a stone foundation with walls of sun-dried clay bricks or wattle and daub, which would then have been stuccoed and painted. If you don't know what wattle and daub is, wattle is simply little sticks woven together in a basket weave, and the daub is a concoction of mud and shit, human and animal waste, mixed into a paste and then slabbed all over the front and back of the wattle. The smell goes away after a while, and again, especially if you stucco and paint it. Also, dirt floors, and at first only a thatched roof, later replaced with tiles. By the 6th century BC, the typical house was much bigger. Again, much like you see here, with 2 to 3 rooms or maybe more built around a small courtyard, with but one entrance into the latter, and usually no windows on the exterior walls, though some houses did have tiny little openings. It's kind of like a window, but they're not very big. Maybe 4 or 5 inches high, 3, maybe a foot wide. Essentially, these would be near the roof line to let in sun and air, but keep out burglars and preserve the family's privacy. But normally all light and air would enter via the courtyard. Some houses may also have had a second story, accessible by interior stairs. There were several types of floor plans used in ancient Greek houses, and you see a variety of collections here from various different excavated sites. These were all variations on a theme of, as mentioned, rooms around a central courtyard. So we have Prostas-style, Prostas-style, Peristyle, and Herdraum-style. First, the Prostas-style. The Prostas-style houses, which is largely what you see here, had a 9-foot wide porch, or prostas, and you see it here. Here's the prostas, again, little prostas. It's not very wide. This one is a bit terribly inaccurate. It's a bit larger than it might have been. And again, you see in the floor plan here from the houses at Olympos, the prostas was in green, the Andron, the men's room, in orange, shops or workspaces in light orange, which would have been on the streets. The oikos, the center part of the house, the family part, in purple. The anteroom, away into the Andron in yellow, the courtyard in gray. Anyway, you'd have the prostas always built on the north side of the courtyard. This is because the warmth of the sun, especially in the wintertime. It only had one or two columns which held up the roof, not the roof of the house, but the roof over the prostas, which might sometimes be a trellis, and between which columns were doors leading to the various rooms of the house. Now, on the prostas, this porch, a family might keep their hand mill, a marble basin, perhaps a bench or chair. The pasta-style house, unfortunately, was not actually made out of pasta, which would have been quite a lot of fun if you think about it. But no, pasta style had a long portico or pastas. So here's the example. The prostas style here, a little prostas. The pastas essentially a large prostas. And again, you see it here. Prostas here is in light blue. The andron in orange. The anteroom right here. Now the idea is you only can get to the andron through the anteroom. The oikos in green. The storeroom in brownish. Courtyard in gray. And again, these are various pastas houses and olinthos. And different types of pastas, different styles. Athens, olinthos, delos, and latmos. Anyway, the pastas, again, on the north side of the courtyard, because the sun would warm it, especially in the wintertime, and then warm the entire house, about 9 feet wide, and the extra length meant more columns, about 3 or 4, to keep up the roof of the pastas, which might sometimes be a trellis, between which, again, were openings to the different rooms of the house, including the andron and the oikos, and like the prostas, a family might keep various tools and implements, maybe a chair or bench here. The Herdraum-style houses were quite different than the pastas and prostas ones. Oftentimes, the courtyard, oftentimes you might have a pastas house, as you sort of see here. Here are the two pastas houses, rebuilt as a Herdraum house. Though kind of a Peristyle here. Here you see the difference, the Prostas-style rebuilt as a Herdraum house. Anyway, here the courtyard is quite reduced in size, that the greater roominess, you might say, instead of being taken up by the courtyard, is taken up by the oikos room itself. So it's in the courtyard is now in the center of a square complex, which again you see here. Sometimes there's an excess courtyard in the back, and around which all the rooms of the house would have been arranged. All the rooms with interior connections to each other and the courtyard, except the andron, the men's room, which was accessed only through the courtyard via an anteroom onto which the main entrance opened. Peri-style houses, again seen here, different variety. These only become common in the Hellenistic period. They had a column stoa, which is largely what you see this part right here, all around the courtyard, giving a kind of cloisters effect for a variety of uses. This might include reading, walking, meditating, writing, anything needing shade. It was popular among the wealthy as it made the house look larger and more impressive, while its painting and decoration gave off this sheen of sheer luxury. The main entrance on this style of house, the Peristyle, did not open directly onto the courtyard or even onto an anteroom, but into a thyroron, a kind of mudroom. where visitors could wait to enter during bad weather, and thence go through one or maybe two double-winged doors into a long passageway, a prothyron, and thence into the courtyard. And again, you can see it here, for example. This is the entrance, perhaps the thyroron, and then this is a bit different. So this is the long passageway, the prothyron here, which would have gone this way, into here, and then around into the courtyard itself. Again, this part here, the prothyron on the right edge, is probably a better one here. This long entrance, sort of going directly into the courtyard. There's a little bit of a passageway. And then again, the prostas, in this case, would have been in green, the oikos in purple, the courtyard in gray, and this is something done kind of similar with this one here. Anyway, in this area, the courtyard is where wells, altars, pools, which would double as water reservoirs, and fountains would have been found. This was especially popular in the homes of the wealthy, while the private rooms had the usual storage rooms, and oikos with a hearth and a dedicated kitchen, a bathroom with both tub and toilet, and the tub and toilet normally would, in this type of house, would have been located next to the street for easy access to the sewers, bedrooms on the second floor, and increasingly another interior courtyard for the use of the family alone. And again, you can see this here. Here is the original little thyroron, a little bit of an anteroom here into the Andron, the yellow, and then into the Andron. This is perhaps the courtyard, the public courtyard, the Peristyle, whereas a family's more private courtyard would have been up here. Unlike the other houses, both walls and columns in a Peri-style house would have been richly painted and decorated. And the floors no longer simply made of wood, but elaborate mosaics, all of which made the house seem cool and bright, giving that look and feel of utter luxury. Now, the courtyard is normally located in the southern section of the house, again to take full advantage of exposure to the sun for the cold winter months, whereas the prostas or the pastas with its roof or little trellis could be a bit of a shade. This was not only the physical center of the house, but also the connection to the outside, and all the other rooms of the house, through which the rooms could only receive both sunlight and ventilation. And as a result, there were normally no trees or bushes, nor plants or flowers in the courtyard. That is, it was a working space, not a garden, as the plants, flowers, trees, bushes could interfere with the rooms getting either sunlight or ventilation or both. Here in the courtyard, chores could be done, food prepared and cooked, cloth woven and garments sewn, laundry done, clothes bleached in the sun, garbage discarded and composted, children placed safely instead of on the street, family celebrations take place, family gods worshipped, sacrifice and libations to them made. Also, here, the family's well and water reservoir were found, and usually stairs to the upstairs, all away from the prying eyes of outsiders. The oikos, which you have heard me mention before. The oikos was the main room in every Greek house and was almost always located in the northern part of the house, again to take full advantage of the warmth of the sun in winter, the sun, of course, shining directly on its southern wall. This was where the family spent most of their time when not in the courtyard. And in smaller houses, where women cooked on the open hearth, there are no fireplaces yet, much less chimneys. So you see here, this would have been the open hearth, again, the open hearth. Women cooked on the open hearth in the center of the room. The family ate here, also slept on sleeping platforms built against the walls. Next to the oikos were normally two smaller rooms, one to bathe, with wealthier homes having tubs built in, as you see here, the other to relieve oneself in a pit toilet, where the dung would have been cleaned out once or twice a year, the waste then used as fertilizer. Now, the Andron, also mentioned before. What the heck is that? The Andron, from andros, meaning man, the Andron was where the men of the house would host their male friends in dinner and drinking parties. Maybe as a symposium, which is discussed in another lecture as a kind of high school, or maybe not, discussing politics or business, gossiping about their neighbors and the women, perhaps, if the owner was wealthy enough, also with hired musicians, dancers, entertainers, and prostitutes. But its public nature meant that the women of the house were forbidden from entering it. Likewise, the male guests would have been forbidden from entering the private rooms of the house, including the courtyard. Because of its role, the Andron was the most decorated room in the house, sometimes the only decorated room in the house. Normally, it would have been rectangular shaped, as pictures as you see here, with couches pushed up against the walls where two men, which is normally the maximum a couch could hold, would lounge next to each other, sometimes both in the nude, sometimes not, with a low central table on which would be put olives, grapes, and wine. The Andron was thus normally found near the house's entrance, so the women could do their work without interruption by non-family males walking through the house. The Andron, being the men's quarter, led in the past to the idea that there was a Gynaikonitis, or women's quarter. As you can kind of see here, or this is the Gynaikonitis, Gynaikonium, Andron, the oikos, the women's room, and you have painters in the 18th, 19th century making it look like it's a giant harem, all the women running around nude. But only two literary sources suggest it, and both are actually a bit ambiguous as to whether this actually existed. And the idea is here is where all the women spent their day doing their main non-cooking work, which is weaving cloth, sewing garments, and so forth. But so far, over 2 centuries of excavations in ancient Greek cities has found no evidence of looms, spindles, or anything associated solely with the lives of Greek women, at least not in any particular room exclusively, which is what the whole point of a Gynaikonitis was about. And recent studies suggest that most rooms had no fixed use, such that even the old designation of a men's quarter, the Andron, and the Gynaikonitis, or the women's quarter, should be viewed more as public versus private, meaning the Andron was public space, open to those outside the family, which meant the women of the family were not allowed to enter, as they were not allowed, Greece was a very patriarchal place, which meant the women of the family could not enter it, as they could have no truck with men not part of the family. And thus all the other rooms would have been private, and thus not open to males who were not part of the family. Now, urban housing, as you see here in these artist reconstructions, shared adjoining walls. At least back then, you don't have any big electronic stereos with heavy bass driving each neighbor crazy. Though you could have had mewling cats and dogs and crying babies, nonetheless. Anyway, joining walls, these were divided into small blocks by narrow streets, as I talk about in my lecture on the ancient Greek city. Shops sometimes located in the rooms towards the street, either for the use of the house's owner, often an artisan, or perhaps to rent out. The wrap-up quote. Now, this quote is actually one of the only two sources on which the idea of a gynaikonitis, a room confined solely to the women of the household, like some kind of harem, is based, and think about how it says. This is from a legal case written by a man named Lysias for a man who was accused of murder named Euphilides. Quote, "Members of the jury, let me explain. I have a small house which is divided into two, the men's quarters and the women's, each having the same space, the women upstairs and the men downstairs. After the birth of my child, his mother nursed him, but I did not want her to run the risk of going downstairs every time she had to give him a bath, so I myself took over the upper story and let the women have the ground floor." And yes, it sort of sounds as if there are a special women's room, but if he has to explain it to a jury, it means it is not common. So in this case, this may be just one guy's odd arrangement in his house. Let me know what you think of this quote and of all its consequences in the comments section below. Also, what you liked about this video and what other historical topics or subjects you'd like to see in future videos. Be sure to click like, share, and especially subscribe, as it will help me bring you more great videos, and that little bell thingy, so you'll know when the next History Waits for No One video is posted. If you want to know more, there are recommended studies on this topic in the description below, along with other ways to connect with me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the past.